Alright, welcome to our lesson on trophic levels. Hopefully this will be a quick one so we don't take up too much time. So what we're going to talk about mostly in this lesson is how energy flows through trophic levels. We're going to start to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about how matter cycles through trophic levels, something we already touched on when we did the biogeochemical cycles earlier. So before we can move on to talk about energy, we've got to talk about something weird about energy. So you know the law of conservation of matter and energy. Neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. That is true. Energy can be converted from one type of energy to another. And similarly, you can do some conversions with matter, rearranging atoms in order to form molecules. And as you get into higher levels of science, you start to learn about some of the other matter changes that can happen. But for now, we're going to focus on energy. You can actually classify energy as either high quality or low quality. High quality energy can be anything like some of the forms that you see listed here. It's something that can be used to do work. It tends to be concentrated and organized so that you can harness it fairly easily. And it's pretty easy to convert it into low quality energy. The same is not true of low quality energy. This is mostly low temperature heat. If you had high temperature heat, you could use that to do some work. So for example, when we talk about energy production later on in the year, we're going to talk about how a lot of times to produce energy, you boil water to make steam. That's using heat to do work. That is not the low quality energy though. What I'm talking about is like the heat that's making molecules move around a little in the air, or the molecules in your body. That type of energy is not concentrated enough to be usable for work, and you can't really convert it back to the high quality of energy. So because of this, ecosystems always have to have energy added to them. Life on Earth has survived just fine with a set number of atoms of, each of the elements we've talked about, but you always have to have new energy coming in. And so you have to have this continuous input of this high quality energy, otherwise ecosystems can't function. So while remember energy can't be created or destroyed, if you have low quality energy that's being produced, it can't be used to do work, and so it's effectively lost to organisms. They can't use it. So let's take a look at this in graphical form. So the source of the energy for a lot of the ecosystems on the planet is the sun. And sunlight is a high quality source of energy. It can be used to do work. So let's say that high quality energy is taken in by an organism, probably a photosynthesizer. Well, some of that high quality energy is going to end up converted into low quality energy that gets lost as kind of heat off of an organism. So that means that that organism has less high quality usable energy to pass on to the next organism, who is going to do all these tasks required to keep themselves alive, and thus convert some of the energy that they took in into low quality energy, leaving even less high quality energy for the next organism. And then they're also going to lose some energy to low quality heat, and they're not going to be able to provide very much energy to the next level in a food chain. Matter, on the other hand, does cycle. So you use energy to transfer matter between the environment and the organisms in biogeochemical cycles. What you may have noticed is there was always an environmental reservoir of these elements, and there was always a biological reservoir. So biogeochemical cycles, as we know, are essential for life, and they demonstrate conservation of matter. You're not using up the carbon in an ecosystem and making it unavailable to anything else. Those carbon atoms can then be rearranged to form a different molecule. So matter doesn't have that same problem. Excuse me, yawns are going to happen. Matter doesn't have that same problem where it's high or low quality, it's just matter. So let's say you have some nitrogen here. This is molecular nitrogen that you find in the atmosphere. It can get rearranged with, of course, some other atoms added into a ammonia molecule right here, which can then be converted into a nitrate, which can then cycle around and be converted back into N2. This can keep going over and over and has been going on for billions of years. So this is going to take us into trophic levels. A trophic level is where an organism is in a food chain or a food web. And it's also going to help relate to how far you are from the base of the food chain or the food web, which is always the producers. So you can break these trophic levels or these organisms into two major categories. You have autotrophs, which is another term for producer. They are self-feeding, that's what auto means. And these are the guys that convert those forms of energy that living creatures can't use into chemical energy stored in biomolecules. So for example, you can't just walk out into the sun and get energy, only a producer can do that for you. And so we are heterotrophs. We are consumers and we get our energy from eating other organisms. There are different types of those consumers based on how far they are from the producer. So your primary consumer is usually either an herbivore or an omnivore, and they consume producers. Your secondary consumer can be an omnivore or a carnivore that consumes primary consumers. Your tertiary consumer is most often a carnivore that consumes secondary consumers, though it's technically possible for an omnivore to be a tertiary consumer. And very rarely you'll have a quaternary consumer. Quaternary stands for a fourth level consumer. Just like tertiary stands for a third level consumer. And if you have trouble remembering that, just remember that third in Spanish is tercero, which is similar to the word that we get tertiary from. Similar to, I believe, like you have a quarter, which is 1/4 of something. So quaternary should look to you a little like quarter, and that the fourth level consumer. It's rare, and we'll talk about that in our next lesson, why it's so rare to have one of those in an ecosystem. And then finally, last but certainly not least, the decomposers, also called detritivores. They consume dead or decaying matter, and they're very important for biogeochemical cycles because they're going to help matter cycle back so producers can get it. So, just a note, energy flow in terrestrial ecosystems as well as those that are close enough to the surface of water or aquatic biomes that they can get sunlight are going to acquire energy from the sun, and then it's going to flow from the sun to producers, and producers make up the lowest trophic levels of an ecosystem, and then as they get eaten, each organism passes on energy to the next trophic level. All right, that's it. We will talk about energy and stuff, and that 10% rule you may remember learning about before in our next lesson.